Alright, Brendan Wiltsey here. It is a beautiful day in the Adirondacks, but it's a bit windy, and I thought I'd show you all something that you can do on a windy day, even in the middle of the day, a cool effect you can create with the clouds if you use a neutral density filter. I'm going to use a 10-stop neutral density filter, a graduated neutral density filter, and a circular polarizer to cut down the amount of light coming into my camera so I can really extend out my exposure time. And because the clouds are moving so fast overhead, they're going to get blurred across the sky throughout this exposure. What I have on the front of my camera here is the Lee filter system with a circular polarizer, graduated neutral density, and then I'm going to meter this, and then I'm going to drop in the 10-stop neutral density filter. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so the trick with getting your exposure right on these sort of shots is to meter without the 10-stop neutral density filter in, because that's going to reduce the light so much that your camera isn't going to accurately meter. And then Lee Filter Systems has a great app that's available on your phone where you can choose your filter if you're using a 6-stop, a 10, or 15, and then in the app you can set what your metered exposure time is. In my case, it's 1/15 of a second, and then it tells you what your exposure should be with that neutral density filter on. So in this case, we're looking at a 1-minute exposure. And so they actually have a timer in the app if you wanted to do the exposure manually, but I recommend using one of these remote releases. In this particular one, I can set my exposure to any time frame that I want. So my camera's built-in timer will only go to 30 seconds, and so this is going to be a 1-minute exposure, so I'm going to use this to do exactly 1-minute exposure. So we're going to get that started right now, and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so I just finished that exposure. It was 1 minute in length, and when I look at the back of my camera, I'm looking at the histograms there. Even with a 1-minute exposure, we're a bit underexposed. So there was just a little bit of the cloud that's really, really bright that was blinking, and so that was a clipped highlight. But a lot of the rest of the frame was still underexposed. So I'm gonna bump that up to I'm gonna go for maybe 1 minute and 15 seconds and check and see what that exposure looks like. Okay, part of this is trial and error. These really long exposures, they're so hard to meter, and during the period of the exposure, especially when you're doing these with clouds and with bright light on the clouds, the light can change a lot over that period of time. So even 1 minute, 15 seconds, exposure is still a little bit dark, so I'm going to push it to 1 minute and 30 seconds. Try that. I'll check back in with you. Okay, so 1 minute 30 seconds was still a little underexposed, but I was really starting to clip some of the clouds, so I'm going to keep that exposure, and I'll be able to bring up some of those shadow areas in post to balance that exposure out. Other thing to think about, though, when you're doing these long exposures is anything that's moving in the frame is going to be blurred. So I intentionally put a little bit of the shoreline, and there's some bushes right near the camera, in this frame so that you can see how throughout that 1 minute and 30 seconds their movement is going to be softened and blurred as well. And that may be something that's distracting from your image, but it also can be a nice addition to add some sort of sense of movement and drama to your image. So this is a really fun technique to play with. Like I said, if you have a 10-stop neutral density filter, you can do this in the middle of the day, and it can be quite dramatic if you do it at sunset, where you get color streaking across the sky along with that movement of the clouds. So it's a really dramatic effect. So feel free to play around with it. You can try and get these longer exposures at sunset without a neutral density filter if you put your ISO really low and bump up your f-stop to something like f16, 18, 22, something in that range. You might be able to get some of this without having to use a neutral density filter. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit the like button down below, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe. Thanks a lot. See you next time.